Welcome to this week's episode of the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Luke, and I'm joined once again by Ciaran of Southwest Boxing Media. And we are sandwiched in between two fantastic Queensberry cards. Last weekend, we had the dramatic Brad Paul's Nathan Heaney conclusion to their rivalry. That topped a magnificent bill in Birmingham. And this weekend, we have the heavyweights. Everybody gets excited for the heavyweights. It's Joe Joyce, it's Derek Chisora, and it promises to be all-out chaos. Ciaran, first and foremost, how are you, mate? How's things?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. I must have done okay on my debut last week, Luke, because you've invited me back, mate. So thank you again for the offer of obviously joining you again this week. And yeah, I'm good. The only thing I have picked up on, Luke, I haven't got a backdrop as good as yours, mate. I'm loving the background there. And I'm in my nan's house at the moment, so mine isn't like, it's no boxing vibe to it, unfortunately. But there we go. We roll.
Superb. You know what? Just going a bit off key while we're on the pod, and we like to do that. But I have got Anti Croller's autobiography up there, and it's something that I rotate. I've had Eddie's up there and Carl Frotch's up there at different times. And it was only when I was interviewing Anti Crawler that he was kind of like, "Is that my book up there?" And I thought that was a really cool moment. That he was like, "You've got my book on display," and it was by pure
That's great,
coincidence. So
mate.
yeah, that was really good. But yeah, back to the boxing. As I mentioned, Ciaran, the heavyweights, Joe Joyce, Derek Chisora, both in the twilights of the career, certainly age-wise for Joe Joyce, and certainly in terms of defeats at the top level for Derek Chisora. An intriguing fight in the fact that it's must-win for both guys if they want to stay at the top table, especially with this influx of Saudi Arabian money. There's going to be opportunities for these guys, for the winner certainly, moving forward, and the loser, they've not really got the time on the side to rebuild. So it all makes for an intriguing heavyweight clash, one that I'm certain, obviously we'll get into our predictions, but one that I'm certain won't go the distance. And it tops another fantastic card from Queensberry. Ciaran, tell us about your thoughts on the card in general. Some great fights on there, prospects in up-and-coming fights, and yeah, just an all-round great British boxing card from Queensberry.
Yeah, it's another one, and we see in, as you said, we see in these more frequently now from Frank. I mean, I've always watched Frank shows, and there's not many I've looked at where I've thought I wouldn't watch that, I wouldn't tune into it because there's been fighters and certain fights and picks on there that I thought, oh, it's worth tuning in just for that or just to watch that type of fighter. But I think more we see now with Frank's cards as we're moving on is you look down the list on the card, and the whole undercard is a bit more impressive than what it has been, and I think that's credit to obviously the Queensberry and the work that Frank is doing. But just coming on to I want to start with obviously the main event. I agree. I mean, just Derek Chisora I want to start with. We seems like we've seen so many different versions of Derek Chisora. I mean, he seems to just keep going and going. I mean, we had Del Boy at once. Remember that, the way he was, that persona, a bit of an enigma, if you like. We all remember the David Hay build-up and how that went about. And, he was a bit of a bad boy, I think, in boxing. And that was Del Boy. But now we're seeing Derek Chisora, and, he still brings it in the ring. Don't get me wrong. He's still got that, that aggressiveness, that tough, come forward fighting style that we love to see. But I think what I have noticed, I don't know if you watched the little sit down at the table. Have you seen that? The pre sort of, I forget what it's called. Is it lock in or something it was called? Did you see that the
Yeah,
other
it's
day?
their version of it. Gloves are off, really, isn't it? I've not seen a lot of it. It's on the to watch list before fight night. I do like the preview stuff, but the clips that I have seen on social media, it's I think it counts for nothing come fight night. But Derek Chisora's all wrong for Joe Joyce, isn't he, in those kind of environments? Derek's really sharp with his tongue, and Joe Joyce, bless him, he's not the sharpest when it comes to wit. He's a great fighter, but and again, it might count for nothing come Saturday night, but certainly Derek Shaw is 10-8 up if we're scoring that as a round.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, mate. I did notice he twisted him in a few knots. I mean, it was expected. He was always going to win that battle, and I think Joe Joyce would expect that himself. I think Joe Joyce has never been a man that, is all about that, really. I think he's more about what happens in the night on the ring and going about his business that way. But yeah, I have noticed as well, I don't know if you noticed it with Chisora. I watched one, I think it was his interview with Umar on Box Nation, it is now, obviously, isn't it? And he seems a little bit more humble, and he seems to be talking a little bit more sensible than what Derek Chisora of old used to do. I don't know if you've picked up on any of that. I mean, maybe it's a sign of, the man getting very, very old. I don't know. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting observation, but I think with Derek Shaw now at 40 years of age, the race is almost run. I don't
Mm,
really think he's going to get into title contention. That shot against Tyson Fury for the WBC title a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was a complete bolt out the blue. And I think, yeah, for Derek, I think the change of attitude will probably come with age and maturity, knowing that he doesn't have to really sell himself anymore. People know what they're going to get with Derek Chisora. Win, lose, or draw, he's going to turn up to fight. It's going to make it rugged. It's going to be messy at times. It's going to be a scrap. And 9 times out of 10, he's either going to knock somebody out or be knocked out himself. Um, I think looking at his record, his last 6 fights, he's won two, lost four. Admittedly, the four that he's lost are back-to-back to Joe Parker, Usyk, and Fury, so it's as
mm.
good as it's getting in the heavyweight division. But the two fights that he did win, the Pulev fight was dramatic, could have gone either way. And Gerald Washington, he went the distance with, I think it was last August, sometime around there. I think it was the anti-Joshua Robert Alenius card. So I think the change of persona has probably come with maturity, knowing that, we're going to get the trash talk and the big build on fight week, but in general, taking away the confrontation with the Deliveroo guy. I'm not sure if you've seen that on social media. That was a bit of
I
a
I did see it, mate.
yeah.
Yeah, I did see it.
So that aside, it seems to be maybe we're getting finally a mature Derek Chisora. I think if we're talking about different versions of Derek, I think my favorite was the run he went on when he was beat. He knocked out Carlos Takam, knocked out David Price. He lost to Dylan White in that run, but when he linked up with David Hayes, his manager, he seemed to go on a real autumn of his career, where he
Mm.
was picking up some big wins, and of course, then he went in with Usyk and he was defeated. So it's a pick and mix with Derek. You never know what you're going to get in terms of the way he speaks out of the ring and the way he's going to fight on fight nights. Like I say, it's kill or be killed with Derek Chisora. Um, I think there's more questions of Joe Joyce given the back-to-back losses to Zhilei Zhang. He wasn't all that impressive against Cash Ali. And even though he's only 2 years younger than Derek Chisora, I think with Joe Joyce, he should be the more fresher, given that he's had many,
Mm.
many less fights than Derek Chisora in a professional ring. So I think for me, Ciaran, certainly the pressure's all on Joe Joyce come Saturday night.
Yeah, I agree, mate. And I still think, though, even with a win, and we're not going to do predictions yet, but I expect Joe Joyce to win. But even with a win, I still think there's a bit of work to do. I still think, coming off those two losses now to Zhilei Zhang, to get himself back in that mix, if he does generally have ambitions to fight for a world title, and that's the route he still believes that he can go down, which I'm sure he will. I still think there's a bit of work to do because I don't think beating Derek Chisora where he's at now in his career at the age he's at is going to be enough to then get fans and people tuning in and thinking, well, do you know what? He could actually still want to win a world title. I still think we need to see something a bit more credible, and that's no disrespect to Chisora. It's just looking at where he is now and where we're at in his career, where I fully expect if Chisora loses on the weekend that he should hang the gloves up. But I feel like I've been saying this forever, to be honest with you. He probably won't. The man just loves fighting. Um, I think you just keep going and going and going, but he should hang the gloves up if he loses on the weekend. And yeah, I just think that if Joe Joyce comes through, and I'm quite confident, I think that he will, then I think we still need to see something else again then. I don't know if you agree with that, Luke. I mean, it's not going to be enough then to elevate himself back into, a front running position for a world title shot or to be in the mix of it, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given the way the heavyweight division is moving at the minute. Guys like Ajit Kabayel on a terrific run of
Mm.
form, Joe Parker on a terrific run of form. These guys were in, a little bit of obscurity 18 months ago. But given their exploits in Saudi and the wins they picked up, like Ajit Kabayel beating Makdulev and Frank Sanchez, stopping both, underdog in both fights. Joe Parker beating Wilder and Zhang. These guys are really elevating themselves up the heavyweight ladder. So for Joe Joyce to beat Derek Chisora, as you say, is it really enough? And I think with Joe Joyce, the age thing plays a huge factor because
Mm.
you can't take baby steps with him. It's going to be from
No.
Derek Chisora, then he's got to go deep waters against a Joe Parker, Ajit Kabayel, fighters of that ilk. I spoke to Billy Nelson, an interview that'll be dropping on the Simbox YouTube channel this week, and he of course trains Mike Bacola, and they spoke of that fight for Joe Joyce and Mike Bacola instead of Derek Chisora, and it never materialized. So it just goes to show the kind of company that Joe Joyce has got to take. He's got to mix it with, sorry, at this stage of his career. because he's not got time on his side. He's 38 years old, and it's a crazy one, isn't it? Because before those Zhilei Zhang fights, he was looked at as nigh on indestructible. We
Yeah.
thought, we looked at him and Joshua as a 50-50 fight. We was debating whether or not, he could get in there and give Tyson Fury a fight, and whether or not he'd take that right-handed Deontay Wilder, given that he took so much punishment in his career. And then
Mm.
in what, 4 or 5 months, two losses to Zhilei Zhang, that whole persona had crumbled around him, and now we're looking at Joe Joyce almost as damaged goods. Uh, 18 months ago, a fight like Derek Chisora would have been bread and butter for Joe Joyce. You would have, like, my
Yeah,
prediction
I
certainly would have
agree.
been Joe
I,
Joyce
I,
walking through him.
I agree with you, Luke. I think, I think that's what that aura that
Yeah.
was around Joe Joyce. We were talking about the juggernaut, and he was every bit of that word and every bit of that nickname. That's what had gone. And every fight that you just mentioned there, I mean, you're talking about your Carbayals and how impressive he's been. Joe Parker, if they were to fight again, you got to be looking at them, I think, and you got to be edging them as favourites now against Joe Joyce. And I think before we wouldn't be saying that. Obviously he beat Parker in terrific fashion. Brilliant stoppage. And if you would looked at, like, I've been really impressed with Carbayal, as you said, but if you'd looked at this going back a few months ago, I would have said, oh, Joe Joyce would just keep walking through him, that style we keep seeing from him. But now we're looking at it a bit differently, and I'm thinking, that's a good fight. It'd be very interesting, and you maybe favour Carbayal in the fight, given the run and the momentum that he's on. But as you said, I think the age is a big thing, Luke. Is Joe Joyce knew when he turned pro, he made that decision to keep going in the amateurs, and that's, who we to question that.
Mhm.
He turned pro late. He knew he had to be faultless. He knew there couldn't be any bumps in the road, really,
Yeah.
given this crop of heavyweights that we've got currently as well. Arguably the best we've seen for some time, the most competitive we've seen for some time. And unfortunately for Joe Joyce and the team around him, he's hit the bump, and he didn't just hit one. I mean, if you hit one, you can rebuild, can get back on the horse, as they say, you can come again. But he lost twice, and it's a long way back, Luke. It really is. And as I said, I just don't see how beating Derek Chisora puts him into one of those big fights now and puts himself back in that position. He's still got a building process, and his time on his side, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is with Joe Joyce as well, I don't want to sit here and act like we're taking this as an opportunity just to bash Joe Joyce, because
Mm.
you look at his resume and the fighters that he's beaten, nobody's stopped Joe Parker the way he did. And he was the first man to beat Daniel Dubois in impressive fashion. So, it was more for me. The thing that let me down more, I not even let me down because fighters win and lose, but the thing that worried me, I should say, was not the two losses to Zhilei Zhang, because Zhilei Zhang's an underrated fighter up until that point. Got frightening power, and unbelievably quick hands. Everything that was wrong for Joe Joyce. It was the comeback fight against Cash Ali. He didn't look like the juggernaut in that fight. That
Mm.
Cash Ali fight, with all due respect to Cash Ali, was made for Joe Joyce to look good in. He was meant to go in there, blow away Cash Ali in 3 or 4 rounds the way he would have done previously. And I think he stop him in the last round, and even that was a bit touch and go whether or not it was a stoppage. After 10 rounds, that was what worried me more. The fact that he took those two losses to Zhilei Zhang. You could accept that maybe Zhang's his kryptonite, but in the comeback
Yeah.
fight where he was meant to look good, he didn't. He looked gun shy. He looked slower than ever when he's not really been the fastest fighter. He put on a lot of weight, so that's the long and short of it. That's the truth of the matter. We're not taking this opportunity to bash Joe Joyce, because again we'll champion his achievements, but the decline has been frightening. If we went back to September of 2022 when he did stop Joe Parker, if you was to sit then, and if we had done this podcast back then, Ciaran, and we had Ajit Kabayel, Joe Parker, and Joe Joyce, and we was to predict in 18 months the trajectory of their career, you would have been laughed out the room if you said Joe Parker is on the verge of a world title shot, Cabell's on the verge of a world title shot, and Joe Joyce is rummaging around for a Derek Chisora fight to rebuild
Yeah.
his career after back-to-back losses to Zhilei Zhang. The change in the division is unbelievable.
And I agree, Luke. And I just want to mention somebody you spoke of there, Daniel Dubois, as well. I mean, the way he beat Dubois, and the fashion that happened in, and you look where Dubois is now. I mean, he's going to be having the biggest fight of his life, biggest fight of his career now in not so long. And just how the landscape has changed, as you said, and I agree with what you said about the worry in that Cash Ali fight was that it just seemed to be like, like when a balloon is deflated, it just seemed to be like that to me. He just seemed deflated, whether it's a confidence thing, and the momentum that he'd been carrying and had been taken with him has sort of been sucked out of him with those two losses. And it was just, yeah, as you said, I don't want to bash him, as you said. I think we'd be wrong to do that. But we've got to be honest as well about what we see. And I think, as you said, Cash Ali was or should have been made for him, and quite emphatically. And yeah, there was a few alarm bells, I think, watching that fight as fans.
Yeah, do you think there's an element of, some people say you make your own luck, but that Joe Joyce has been slightly unlucky that, he was at WBO interim world champion. The way the mandatories fall, his wasn't due against the heavyweight champion at the time. And then he did choose to make a voluntary defense of that interim world title against Ilya Sang, which he lost. It forced him into an immediate rematch because he had nowhere else to turn. He had to try and regain that WBO interim world title. And then you look at the job Frank Warren has done for Daniel Dubois,
Yeah.
to Joe Joyce during the pandemic. I've seen clips of that fight today, actually on social media, and it was an emphatic win by Joe Joyce. He had the injury, Daniel Dubois, but that was caused by punches from Joe Joyce. It was a very credible win, a fantastic win for Joe Joyce. But even in the build up to that, even though Frank Warren promoted both fighters, Frank Warren was firmly in the corner of Daniel Dubois, made no secret of that. And then even afterwards, the opportunities that came for Daniel Dubois rebuilding got him into line to fight Usyk before Joe Joyce got that opportunity to fight for a world title, even though he beat Daniel Dubois. So in terms of the WBO interim status, and the job done by his promoter, Frank Warren, is there a case to be made that Joe Joyce has been slightly unlucky?
I think so. I think you could say, and the points obviously you just raised there were the same as what I was going to say about Daniel Dubois. And I mean, as we said, you look at where he's at now and how quickly things have come round for him. I mean, don't forget, before this fight as well, he had his opportunity against Usyk as well, and he's had two opportunities now. And then you look at Joe Joyce, and as you said, considering they've both been looked after and promoted by the same man, um, I don't want to sit there now and say that because I don't know that, as Frank leaned more towards one or as he pushed one more than the other, because obviously we don't know, we can only speculate on those things. And I'm sure Frank as a professional wouldn't. But maybe it's looking at, the longevity of Daniel Dubois as well, and looking at the youthfulness and just seeing him. I think Frank genuinely believes that he is the future of the heavyweight division. He's said that for so long. And I think he thinks that he's one win away from proving that now, because if he beats AJ and he knocks out AJ, then Frank Warren will be turning around and you saying, well, I did tell you, didn't I? I did say this. I did predict this was going to happen. So, but going back to what you asked me, again, going off a little bit, going back to what you asked me, yeah, I do think that maybe the luck of the cards that he's had, and I don't think it's Frank Warren's fault, if I'm honest with you. I think it's just the luck of the way things have turned out and mandatory situations and where people were tied up at certain points and what have you in different situations. Yeah, I think he has. I think he could have a case for saying that the cards haven't all fallen in his favour, maybe as well as what they've fallen for Daniel Dubois.
Here and now it gets to the juicy part. We've dissected it. We've looked at both fighters. We'll go predictions. Last week I went first with Nathan Heaney against Brad Pauls, a fight that we was both wrong in, by the way. We'll touch on that a little later, but I'll put the ball firmly in your court. I'll give you the opportunity to give your prediction first.
I'm glad you done that, mate, because otherwise I think every week people are going to tune in and they're going to say that Ciaran fella, he just agrees with Luke. Every week he just agrees with him. So, yeah, so my prediction, I sort of touched upon it earlier. I do think that Joe Joyce will win this. I'd be shocked, if I'm honest, if he didn't. And then it would definitely be alarm bells. Is it a million miles away from being a possibility for Derek Chisora to knock out Joe Joyce? No, it's not. We've just talked about confidence, how he looked against Cash Ali, which was a worry, it was a concern. Didn't look the juggernaut, doesn't seem that version of himself anymore. Has got a lot to prove. And obviously, we talked about the heavyweight division. I know it's a cliche, but anything can happen. This is why casual boxing fans love that division more than any other, because they tune in. It could be a knockout anytime you put a heavyweight fight on. So it could happen, a big shock in Derek Chisora winning. But I just don't see it, if I'm honest with you. I think I think it's going to be quite a slugfest, if I'm honest with you. I expect it to be two very, very big men, both punch really hard. Obviously, remains to be seen what Joe Joyce has got left in him in terms of his steel that we saw before and that granite chin. Be interesting to see if Chisora lands clean on him, how he takes it. But I'm going to go with, I don't think it'll go points either way. I can't see that. I'm going to go with a mid to late rounds stoppage for Joe Joyce. I think he will just wear out Chisora. And I don't think he'll knock him out clean. I think it may be a case of a referee jumping in at some point at the back end of the fight and a Joe Joyce win. What about yourself, Luke?
Okay, so maybe it's my turn now to say, that's exactly what I was going to say. But I'll put my little spin on it. I think, as I've alluded to earlier, that if this fight was made a year or any time before that ago, any time before the Zhilei Zhang fights, that you'd have Joe Joyce a clear winner, and it's just a matter of pick around. No disrespect to Derek Chisora, but that was the idea behind Joe Joyce back then. This is a different Joe Joyce. I'd be very interested to see what weight he comes in at. You know, is he going to be lighter and look to move around a little bit? You know, weight's not something we really take into consideration with heavyweights until they come in too big and they're not very mobile.
Yeah.
I think if there's any inkling of doubt in the mind of Joe Joyce, that Derek Chisora is a much more capable and much more dangerous opponent than Cash Ali, and he would exploit that. He'll be looking to dig holes throughout fight week at press conferences in the weigh-in. He'll be looking to get in the mind of Joe Joyce and plant a seed of doubt. If that is the case, then as you say, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Derek Chisora could win. Come fight night, I think I'm gonna say I think both guys go down. I think Joe Joyce has never been difficult to hit. He always backed the power of his chin. Is his first line of defense as opposed to head movement and lateral movement. So I think I can see one of those, bolo overhand rights from Derek Chisora landing and putting Joe Joyce down. Likewise, I can see Joyce putting Chisora down. It's going to be a bit of a slugfest. Might get into the middle rounds and they're leaning on each other, and it might be a bit boring and a bit ungainly. But ultimately, I think I'm just going to side with Joe Joyce in terms of his slightly fresher approach to the fight. That Derek Chisora has been to the well one too many times, dug himself out of a hole one too many times, and ultimately in this fight, I'm going to side with Joe Joyce. Slightly later than yourself, I'm going to say he's going to stop in between 9 and 12. Again, it might not be a one punch clean knockout the way we've seen Dylan White knock out Chisora, but ultimately the ref stopping it or Derek Chisora not coming out the corner in between rounds 9 and 12. But a Joe Joyce stoppage victory is my prediction.
Great stuff, mate. It's certainly one to look forward to, isn't it?
Definitely, as you say, heavyweight boxing, one way or another, is always entertaining. And speaking of heavyweight boxing, we go from two guys at the tail end of their career to another guy that's just starting out, 18, 19 years of age. He's been touted as the next big thing. He's sparred the likes of Joe Joyce and others. Ciaran, someone that we're very excited about here in the UK, and someone that, with the fights that he's had on the Saudi Arabia cards, he's announced himself on the international stage, Mr. Moses Atalma, and he takes on a credible threat this weekend in Marius Wack. Now, this might not be a credible threat in terms of someone that is really going to go in there to win and look to beat him, but someone that's been in there with the best of him, knows how to survive the rounds, and that's what we want from Moses Atalma. He's blowing away these guys left, right, and centre. First round, second round, very exciting. But yeah, really look forward to watching Moses Atalma this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a classic case of, when we use that phrase gatekeeper type thing, it's that type of moment, I think, now for Moses Atuma on the weekend. I do think, that maybe we're looking at Whack now, maybe a little bit too late. And I expect Moses to come through quite well, if I'm honest, given the talent that he is. Everyone's raving about him, as you said. You speak to any heavyweight to spar with him, even some of the very, very best in the division, and they all say that the rounds that they do with him, he seems special. He seems to have something that's going to push him on to be somebody that we're going to talk about for a very, very long time in the heavyweight division. And we're excited, why not? Let's get on the bandwagon and let's get excited about him. But as I said, I think he will win on the weekend, but it's definitely a credible name, and it's one of those names that when you do look at BoxRec and you do look at people's resumes and CVs, and it's one of those names when you see on there, you think, oh yeah, I like seeing that name on there. You know, he's done well. It's good to have somebody like that on there. So I think in terms of what it'll do for Moses, it will just just sort of put a tick on the CV, on the resume, of a name that we do like to see on there, you know, when you're climbing and making this journey up, if you're going to go on and be something special.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of interesting aspects to this fight is one, it's over 10 rounds, which I don't believe most of the time has gone 10 rounds before. And with Marius Wack, he's only been stopped by, top heavyweight fighters, Joe Miller, Alexander Povetkin, Mike Bakole, and Asbat Makhmudov. And of course, it's all about timing. We're not saying Marius Wack's the fighter he was, but it will certainly be one of those where people will stand up and take notice even more of Moses if he can go in there and stop someone that's as credible as Marius Wack. And also
Yeah.
with Moses Talma, when you have a young fighter come through in some of the lower weights, you maybe think, if he wins a world title at 21, 22, that he'll go up. Let's say if he starts at featherweight and you'll be like, oh, he'll win multiple divisions, a 19-year-old prospect winning a world title, somebody like a Nick Ball, I know he's not 19, but a younger fighter that you can picture going up through the weights.
Mm.
Moses Atama, he's going nowhere. He's at heavyweight, and at 19, heavyweights are notorious for blossoming at around 30, 31, mid to late 30s, still active. It's scary to think that Moses Atama is 10 years off reaching his physical prime, and he's doing the things that he's doing now. It's incredible. And, Daniel Dubois is looked at as young for a heavyweight world champion, and that he's the future of the division. Or Jared Anderson at 24, he's the future of the division. Moses Atama is 19. It's a scary prospect, and as British boxing fans, it's exciting for us because we'll get behind our man, and I think the sky's the limit for this man.
Yeah, and as you said, all eyes will be on what he does on the weekend. I think it's a good point you made about Wack. I think even at this, point of his career and where he's at and the age he is, it would be something really, to take note of if he did go in there and stop him. That really would, be something I think we sit up and think, oh, well, fair play, like. I think it might be a bit of a boxing display. I do, if I'm honest with you. I I'm not saying he won't start. I don't think he will though. If I'm honest, I don't think he will. I think it might just be a bit of a boxing display, a bit of a put on a bit of a masterclass. And as you said, the sky seems the limit, but we've just been going over some of these fighters we got in this division. There is lots of tough fights ahead. So as much as we get excited, we don't want to push it too much either because he's still got a low, he's young and what have you. And maybe by the time that he hits his pump and what have you, then maybe some of these fighters will have gone. Maybe they've retired. But it's still a tough crop at the moment. And this division is very competitive. Inside that top 10, there's not many easy fights. So, as he keeps climbing and climbing and progressing on, he's still got a way to go yet. That's what I'm trying to say. As much as we want to be excited, let's not run away with things just yet, Luke, if you get my point.
Okay, mate. Okay, you burst my balloon. I'll keep my feet firmly on the ground, but
Sorry, mate. Sorry.
we look forward to following the journey. On the card, there is plenty of Queensbury prospects. Royston Barney Smith, Umar Khan, Sean Noakes, all in good fights. One fight that I do want to touch on before we move on is Dennis the Menace McCann rematching Baluta. And Baluta is a notoriously tough fight for guys down at those lower weights. He beat Andrew Kane not too long ago. And we've seen what Andrew Kane went on to achieve at weekend, winning Commonwealth and British titles. He drew with Dennis McCann in a fight that I believe he was winning. That fight was stopped due to a cut. So yeah, massive props to Frank Warren and Queensbury, and mostly Dennis McCann for taking this rematch at this stage. It's a fight that he could have avoided. It was a bit of a banana skin last time, but he said, said one fight since, and now he's right back into the rematch on a big card. Exciting fight for me, Ciaran.
Yeah, I agree. And I think looking at it from Dennis's point of view, I think the reason that he wanted to get this straight back on is because it's one of those, I think it's a classic case of, Dennis is being touted as another special fighter, somebody that could go on and do big things in the sport. But I think it would have been, if he hadn't have gone back in now and tried to right this wrong, no matter what he went on to achieve, people would always, that classic case of people always say, oh, well, that Baluta fight, mind, he was beating you there. He was beating you. He should have won on that night. And I think that would have been sort of living in his head.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about Dennis wanting to prove this to himself. Dennis, perhaps, I'm sure, believes that he wasn't at his best that night in terms of, he knows how good Baluta is. We've talked about his respect for him, what have you. But I think Dennis would probably believe that maybe it just wasn't his night that night. And I think Dennis generally would believe that we're going to see a much, much better version of himself on the weekend, and he'll believe that he can go in there and win this fight, you know. So yeah, I think it was more in terms of getting it on quickly was a point to prove to himself, if that makes sense, Luke, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, hats off to Dennis McCann. He's training in Liverpool now, and he took on Brad Strand last time out. Baluta's not had a fight since that McCann fight. So for Dennis McCann to, you know, have that, as I say, potential banana skin against Baluta, he finished a draw. His next fight after that was against an undefeated domestic opponent, who he absolutely schooled, and now he's gone into the second fight with Baluta. So yeah, hats off to Dennis McCann. It's again, as you say, a fight that I do expect him to win, and again announce him on a bigger stage as he continues his journey. I think this is the right rung of the ladder for him to be stepping on at this stage. Ciaran, before we close off, I want to take a little look back on last week's show, the Magnificent Seven card from Queensbury, Frank Warren, another installment of the Magnificent Seven series, which delivered up and down the card again. A couple of fights that we want to pick out between us, of course, the main event. Brad Paul's stopping Nathan Heaney. He's the new British middleweight champion. He stopped him in the 12th round. It was another great 12 rounds, wasn't it, Ciaran?
It was really, really enthralling, really enjoyable again. We've been lucky, you know. It's sometimes you worry sometimes in these rematches. You think the first one was so good. Can it live up to it? Can it be just as good? Can it be just as action packed? And credit, it was really enjoyed it. Really, really. We were texting obviously while he was on, Luke, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. But you know, full props, fair play to Brad Pauls. He proved it wasn't a fluke. You know, it wasn't a one-off that first time round. You know, people saying maybe he had the night of his life, and you know, Nathan Heaney wasn't quite at it. He proved that wasn't the case. He went in there, he got the business done on the weekend, and a bit gutted for Nathan, because I got to be honest, we've spoken to Nathan with Southwest Boxing Media. We've interviewed him twice, and such a lovely guy, really, really nice guy, you know, and he deserves everything that he's achieved. But it's Brad Paul's moment now, you know, and Brad Paul seems a great guy as well, and here he is now, British and Commonwealth champion, and it'd be, you know, let's see what he can do. Let's see where he can take himself.
Absolutely. I think a great fight for Brad Pauls, given that he's now won the title. I don't know if they're going to have a third fight with Nathan Heaney, but if he doesn't, my man Denzel Bentley, a guy that, you say that you've interviewed Nathan Heaney. These guys are all great guys. Denzel Bentley, for me, who lost to Nathan Heaney, would be a great fight for Brad Pauls. I think they announced the fight for 17th of August for Denzel Bentley against Derek Chisora. So that's a good domestic fight again. There was wins for Chantel Cameron, Zach Parker, Solomon Dakers. But for me, the fight of the night, arguably with the main event, was Echo Asuman against Owen Cooper. I think this fight was a sleeper on the card, that Owen Cooper was the up-and-comer, and even though Echo Asuman's only lost once, he was looked at as the veteran, and it would be a great scout for Owen Cooper to have on his record. But the second half of that fight, Ciaran, is as good as it gets as a British boxing fan. Cooper down in the sixth, then he drops Asuman massively in the ninth, and you're thinking it's all to play for in the 10th, and Asuman obliterates him in dramatic fashion. One of the knockouts of the year and one of the fights of the year for me, certainly domestically, Ciaran. Really impressed.
Be honest with you, mate. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was my favourite fight on the card, and that was the one that I like to always watch the fights back the next day. Maybe a little bit sad, I don't know. But I like to watch them back the next day as well. And that was the one I put on first, and that says it all about it. You know, it was great. It was a great watch, and that knockout was something. You know, it was something special. That was a really, really good knockout, and a heavy finish from Esserman. And but yeah, fair play to Cooper as well. You know, and there was people within the game, people within inside boxing and know they boxing, they were really picking him and saying, you know, this boy, he's good. Don't underestimate him. He's very, very good. You know, we've seen Esserman, we've been following for a little bit, but people were saying about Cooper, and fair play, he proved that. You know, what a fight, what a performance, and as you said, you know, anything can happen. In boxing, we used to see we can have dramatic finishes, and this was certainly one of them. You know, and fair play, what a knockout, what a finish.
Definitely. And finally, just to touch on that card, tell us about Andrew Kane and his victory winning the Commonwealth and British Bantamweight Championships with a fantastic knockout of Ashley Lane. Very gutsy Ashley Lane, but Andrew Kane really showing his levels and his potential again, that he's going to go up through the levels and go into bigger and better things. But it's all started on Saturday night winning the British and Commonwealth titles.
Yeah, I really do, and I'm going to sound a bit of a hypocrite now, Luke, because I was telling you not so long ago to rein it in a little bit about Moses Atuma, and just to steady yourself, and here I am now, sort of throwing the plaudits at Andrew Kane. But yeah, I am excited. I really am. As I said, I talked to you about that gym last week, and it's flourishing. Nick Ball, obviously world champion now. The McGrail brothers there. This Everton Red Triangle gym is a great gym. They seem to have such a good vibe there. I was listening to Nick Ball speak in the before the fight started, and he was just talking about Kane, and the gym and the buzz that's in there at the moment, and it looks special, mate. So yeah, it's certainly a career to follow, and exciting.
Absolutely. I think that gives the Magnificent Seven cards really do give these fighters the platform to perform, get the wins, and then go on to bigger and better things. Ciaran, we've reached the end of this week's episode of Let's Talk Boxing podcast. As always, man, I'd like to thank you for your time and joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
Guys, thanks for watching the Let's Talk Boxing podcast on YouTube. If you listen to it on Spotify and Apple, please leave us a review. On YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, the like button, comment your predictions for all the fights this weekend, and we will catch you on next week's episode.